Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice.
You heard about our new program called Profitability Under Pressure. Hey, this is Chad with Breakthrough, and I want to personally invite you to join our new course as a listener of the Grow Your Practice podcast. I'm assuming that you're a practice owner and you are under pressure because of inflation, because of declining reimbursements or decreased willingness to pay. If you're a cash-based practice, this program is perfect for you. So applications for our next group close on March 21st. And in the program, we're going to take a look at your unique practice and show you 11 ways where you can improve your profit margins, the margin of safety for your practice. We've had over 60 owners complete the course so far and wanted to share a few highlights from owners and what they've implemented, put into action in their own practice. Ken, one owner, was able to negotiate a better insurance rate with, let's call it Insurance Company A. Lance, the practice owner in Arkansas, completed one exercise called the Profit Leak Audit, which is one of the first things we teach in the program. And that the end result of just doing that one exercise was worth $1.3 million in this year, 2024, to his practice. Another owner, Lisa, was able to reactivate 40 past patients with just a single text message. So no matter if your practice is large or small, if you're looking to improve profitability, this program can help you grow. In the end, have a greater margin of safety for your practice. Make sure you sign up by March 21st. Go to getbreakthrough.com/apply. That's getbreakthrough.com/apply. Now back to our show. Chad Madden here with the Grow Your Practice podcast. And in this episode, we're going to talk about a question I got from an owner. And that question was, what can I do to improve my profitability? And where should I start in terms of marketing? How should I think about that? So in this episode, I'm going to walk through how I would think about doubling profitability, and we're going to focus on reactivations. So doubling profit with reactivations. Now, in any private practice, there are basically 5 ways that we can get a new patient. Number 1, we can have reactivations. This is simply a past patient who is coming back to us for additional care. It might be for the same diagnosis or a different diagnosis. It's irrelevant, but what is relevant is that we saw them in the past, we're no longer treating them, and now they're returning to us for additional care. Doubling profits is fairly self-explanatory, but let's say you're at a 10% margin right now and you wanted to get to 20% to have a greater margin of safety in your practice. That's what I mean by doubling profits. So it doesn't matter if that 10% is 100K a year or if it's $1 million a year. Doubling would literally mean just doubling that monetary value. So 5 channels. Number 1 is reactivation. Number 2 is word of mouth referrals. These are, many practices will call this friends and family. So these are patients who are referring you other patients. Number 3 is a professional referral. So you want to follow your state practice act, but for most of us, that's going to be a physician, an MD, a DO, a nurse practitioner, a PA, a midwife, a dentist, a podiatrist, a specialist, etc. Number 4 is going to be partners. These could be large employers in your area. They could be social or civic groups. They could be other businesses. And the way to think about this is other companies that have lists that you would want to expand your list with. So, maybe your target demographic shops at a certain furniture store or goes to a certain yoga studio, then that would be a potential partner. And we can generate new patients from there. And number 5 is cold traffic marketing. This is the hardest lift. It's the hardest thing to execute on. And yeah, but that's, advertising online or offline to attract people who haven't been to your practice before, brand new patients. Now, why would we focus on reactivations? Well, one of those 5 marketing channels, new patient channels, reactivations are the lowest hanging fruit. If we were to draw a 5 or 10 mile radius around your practice, if you're in a large metro area, it might be 1 mile. It's whatever people are willing to travel to get to your office. But if we were to draw that radius, how many people would be in that radius? The average answer that we get is 50,000 people. So let's say there's 50,000 people in your 5-mile radius. Great. And if we had to guess who the people were of those 50,000 who are most likely to come into your private practice next month, in all likelihood, it's going to be those people that have the highest awareness of you. They already know, like, and trust you. That's going to be your past patient list. And at best, that's going to represent maybe 10% of that 50,000. So maybe you've seen over the course of the last 20 years, 5,000 of those people. So, and again, here we're going to focus on reactivations and just doubling with reactivations. Another reason that we want to do that is, focus there is we want to increase lifetime patient value. So, if we're investing money in marketing and somebody comes through our doors and we've provided them with high quality of care and they're now a raving fan and they've achieved their goals and graduated their treatment plan, that person is the most likely person to be reactivated. The other thing that happens is when we add on additional plans of care on the back, it decreases our cost of acquisition, commonly referred to as CAC, CAC. Yeah, CAC. The other thing it does is it increases our lifetime patient value. And anytime that we're having a sophisticated conversation about marketing, we want to increase our CAC to lifetime patient value ratio. I'm not going to deep dive into that, but just you want to increase that in order to survive and keep your doors open. The next thing is if I'm working with an owner who has a slow season, so whether it's a snowbird season or like in the Northeast where, from Thanksgiving through the end of the year, things shut down a bit, the easiest place, the easiest channel for us to go to increase our efforts and realize results during those slow seasons is going to be with our past patient list and specifically focus on reactivations. So it gives us consistency during our slow seasons. It helps us fill space and fill schedules easier and at a lower cost with less effort than any other marketing means. Now, who is this for? This is for practice owners that have a list. So if you have an email list, a mailing, direct mail list, snail mail list, or better yet, a cell phone number list so that you can text, that's a great start. If you don't have a list at all, that's okay. You'll be able to build one over time, but I'm not going to focus on that here. You have a capacity to treat that is unmet. So you have a potential to treat more patients. So you have space and schedules to fill, and they're not full today. Or you're thinking about adding additional space by opening another clinic like a de novo or adding on to an existing clinic. Another thing that would make this relevant for you is you are adding a clinician. I know frequently when I'm talking with an owner and they'll say something along, we have a waiting list right now, but I'm afraid to hire that next clinician because I'm not sure we're going to stay busy. Well, the way to overcome that, the way to remedy that is through better control with your reactivations. What are some of the pitfalls with reactivations, and especially when we're talking about doubling profitability? Well, one is an assumption around conversion. So if we do an amazing job at getting out marketing materials via email, via direct mail, text campaigns, et cetera, to our past patient list, and we assume that every one of those people who reaches out and responds is going to be converted over to a new patient, we're missing the ball. So you really need to nail two things in order to get consistent reactivations. One is to have the right marketing piece, which I'll talk about here. The second one is you have to have team members that are good at conversion. So when somebody responds to a text or email, you have to have competent team members that can handle that. A few years ago, we made this assumption on our marketing team here at my private practice that nearly 100% of people that scheduled a first appointment, so free screen or eval, followed through as a patient and landed on a plan of care. And then one quarter, we just went back and audited it. And for one office, a single site office in 90 days, we had 99 first appointments who no-showed or canceled and never were rescheduled. Now, as soon as we put attention on it and a process in place, that number shrunk dramatically. And I think we were down to 17 the next quarter. But one of the pitfalls is there's a blind assumption around conversion. And that's something that you have to pay attention to, especially when we're talking about marketing and reactivations. The second big pitfall that I see is ignoring the list entirely and going to cold traffic marketing first. The lowest hanging fruit, why would you crawl by, low hanging fruit and spend more time, money, and energy reaching the highest level of fruit, right? It doesn't make sense. So we want to make sure that we have reactivation systems in place first before we attempt to do something that is going to involve more time, money, and resources, such as cold traffic marketing, whether it's online or offline. Pitfall number 3 is a checkbox mistaken for trackable results. So what I've seen a lot of owners do is they'll send out an email campaign. It's typically like their newsletter in a PDF format that they email out, and they'll say, "Oh, I do emails," but they never track reactivations from it, because if they did, they would be using email in a better way than just simply sending out their email or sending out their newsletter via PDF. So no tracking. We want it to be trackable. We want to use direct response marketing. Number 4 is no list, or not keeping track of a list, as pitfall number 4. In my own experience, at one point, we've had some challenges with the front desk that, they would collect the phone number, they would collect a mailing address, but they would not collect an email address. And they would say, lots of excuses, explain it away, but they wouldn't collect that email address enough, right? Too many gaps there. So no list is absolutely brutal, and we corrected that, and now we collect emails from every patient. Another one is only offers. So that's only making offers to the list, however you're doing that. Another one is only delivering value and never making an offer. So that would be pitfall number 6. Now, how do we execute this? How do we really control? So I'll give you a simple exercise here, but let me give you the principles first. Number 1 is we need to select a media type. So how do you want to communicate with your past patients? You can do it via text, which is quickly taken over, at least for us and our controls. You could send a direct mail piece, whether it's a handwritten letter, 1-to-1, or a patient newsletter, which you mail out to 20,000 people. Or you could send an email. Almost every reactivation campaign that we've ever seen that we have data on is one of those 3 media types: text, direct mail, or email. The second thing we want to do is we want to consider the effects of both 1-to-1 and 1-to-many. 1-to-many is where we send a patient newsletter, the same exact patient newsletter, to 10,000 people, or whatever your patient list size is. 1-to-1 is where you communicate in a way that's highly personalized to the recipient. So, for example, my partner here at Madden and Gilbert Physical Therapy, when he started with us back in 2008, Mike Gilbert, filled his schedule, went from 0 to 120 visits in a week with another clinician, and did that in 90 days. And I asked him, I said, I don't understand. You're seeing the same number of new patients. You don't really have, you're doing something. You're not losing patients to drop off. What are you doing that's different? He just kind of dismissed it humbly, and he said, "Oh, nothing really." And I said, "Okay." And then one day I saw in his work area, this is when we still had charts and didn't have any EMR yet. He had a stack of discharge charts, and on the back of every chart, there was a card that was paper clipped. I said, "What are you doing right there?" And he said, "Well, every patient I've ever treated since I graduated DPT school, even at my previous position, I write those people a handwritten card." And I was like, this is amazing. And I had other mentors talk with me about handwritten letters, but Mike followed a very simple process. And it was, 1, he would recognize and acknowledge that person for the work that they put in and for the achievement that they had made throughout treatment. 2 is he would write something personal about them. Hope you have a great time with your grandchildren at Myrtle Beach, something along those lines. But it had to be personal. Then number 3, he would do a very subtle call to action that when that person needed him again in the future, this was the best way to contact him. And he would include his, perhaps the office line, direct office line, or his email address. And yeah, so he was just a machine with those, and it quickly showed through because his schedule was always full. The biggest leak that many of us have in terms of profitability is underutilized schedules and underutilized space. And if you want to see how dramatic that can be talking about profitability, go back whenever you're listening to, go back to last month, right? And what would it have looked like if all of your clinicians, if their schedules were full, right? So 95% plus attendance rate, and they're completely booked out. Now that wouldn't cost you and your clinic, likely, depending on your model, but for most practices, you won't have to pay any more rent. There would be no more expense. Your employment expense was already handled, right? But instantly, anything that you add in addition to what you did, right, what you actually did in that month, that would be margin. So if we're talking about improving margin or doubling margin in a short period of time, the way that I've done this in clinics with reactivation is we look to fill the space and fill the schedules as quickly as possible. And what I mean by filling the space is if we have a 2,000 square foot clinic, we should have 4 full-time clinicians in that space. So that's, yeah, again, just doubling back on doubling profitability, doubling profits with reactivation. And getting back to the how-to, so we talked about one-to-one, one-to-many, personal communication versus non-personal broadcast. The third thing that we want to do is we want to think about the offer. It's very possible, and most practices do this. They only provide goodwill and value, and they never make an offer to their patient list. Well, if you get into like Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz, that was written back in the 60s, he said, anytime you're dealing with a target market that already knows, likes, and trusts you, it's the most simple job in the world. And it's, you literally just give them a direct offer. If somebody's bought from you in the past, regardless of your business, and this goes beyond private practice and healthcare, the easiest thing to do is make them a direct offer. So what could you offer them? Well, you could offer them a piece of information. Maybe you invite them to a workshop, or you invite them to another type of event. We've promoted, I've written a couple books on back pain. Mike has written a book on back pain. We'll offer the book, and that typically leads into, a reactivation conversation, but we've done that in our newsletters, emails, etc. You could offer an event. So for years, we ran what essentially is a free screen day. We called it the greatest promotion ever. And I wrote about it in the book, Killer Marketing Secrets. But there's some sort of offer that we will mix into our patient communication, especially on a one-to-many level. So you want to select your media type. You want to select whether you're doing one-to-one or one-to-many, and then you want to pick your offer as well. Key point here. We notice a direct correlation in our clinics. So we have 7 clinics right now. All of them are doing a fairly standard one-to-many, right? So it's the same patient newsletter mailed out to all the clinics. We run the same Facebook ads, the same Instagram ads, same TikTok ads, et cetera, for every office. Send out the same email campaigns to our patient list for every office. The difference that we see, and this is, again, directly correlated, is in the quantity and quality of the communication from the clinician to the patient. Just like I mentioned with Mike, right? If you're a treating clinician, when you discharge somebody or they graduate your care, sending them a handwritten note is, a very easy way for you to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And I'm going to end on one other idea that you could do. Whenever our clinicians are not busy and they have gaps in their schedule, they have a cancellation or no-show, that's when they should be putting effort into reactivations. So reaching out to past patients. Something that you could do for reactivations and will improve your payer mix is you could take your patient list. You could go into your EMR. You could decide who your best payer is. Let's say your best payer is Highmark or Blue Shield. You could go into your patient list and select any patient with Blue Shield as the insurance company and that you haven't seen in 6 months. and you could send them this very simple text. Huge disclaimer here. Make sure you're legal and compliant and everything else that you need to be as a healthcare clinician. But you could send them a highly personalized text that says something like this. Hi, Mary. It's been 6 months since I last saw you for your shoulder. This is Chad over at Madden Gilbert PT. How are you? So asking some form of how are you, it's personalized. I asked about her shoulder, or mentioned her shoulder and mentioned that I hadn't seen her in 6 months. Very, very simple. The response rate to that template, that message, is about 70%. And from that, about 70% of the responders will end up reactivating, coming back in for a plan of care. You have to have the, communication. You have to ask them how they're doing. If, nothing is, if they say, oh, my shoulder's great, then you can ask, well, do you have anything else going on? Right. Or something along those lines. What else is bothering you? So very, very simple. And I will tell you this, you're a clinician. You invested heavily into earning your degree, invested in your continuing education so you can provide high quality of care. There's a tremendous need out there. And really all you have to do is tap into that. And you can be busier than you can imagine. And that busyness and filling your schedule will give you lots of options in terms of selecting who you want to treat and work with as well. But anyhow, that's in answering that original question, how would I think through improving profits or doubling profits with reactivation? That's what I would do.